Welcome back to The Deep Dive, where we deep dive into the world of earnings calls,
Unpacking all the jargon and
laying out
the key takeaways.
for you so you don't have to wade through those long transcripts yourself.
Exactly.
Today we're looking at Sportradar Group
Ticker symbol SRD.
and their Q4 2024 earnings call.
Oh, this was a big one.
Yeah, they had a lot going on.
Definitely a lot to unpack here.
So why don't we start with just a quick overview of the headline numbers?
Yeah, so overall, really strong year for Sportradar,
Okay,
both for the full year and for the fourth quarter.
so give us the full year picture first.
Sure, so for the full year 2024, they brought in $1.1 billion in revenue.
Okay, so
That's a 26% increase compared to 2023.
very solid top line growth there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what about profitability?
That's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
Their adjusted EBITDA,
Which, for anyone who's not familiar, that's a measure of operating profit.
right, it strips out some of the noise.
So you can get a clearer sense of the core business performance.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so their adjusted EBITDA.
It jumped up to $222 million for the full year.
Wow.
That's a 33% increase year over year.
Huge.
And their margins, meaning the percentage of revenue that turns into profit, that also expanded to 20%.
So they're getting more efficient as they scale up. That's a really positive sign.
Yeah, definitely. And it really shows in the fourth quarter numbers, too.
Oh, so they kept that momentum going.
Oh, absolutely.
All right, so walk us through Q4.
Q4 was a record-breaking quarter for them.
Oh, wow.
In terms of revenue, they reached $307 million,
Okay.
which again is a 22% jump compared to Q4 of 2023.
So continuing that really strong growth.
Exactly. And their adjusted EBITDA for Q4 surged by 53% to $61 million.
53%, that's a massive acceleration.
Yeah, it is. And margins for the quarter also expanded to 20%.
So they're clearly firing on all cylinders right now.
Yeah, no doubt about it.
So beyond just the top line growth and profitability, another thing we always like to look at is customer retention.
Yeah, because acquiring new customers is great, but keeping your existing customers happy and spending more.
That's really what drives sustainable growth.
Absolutely.
So how did Sportradar do in that department?
Well, their customer net retention rate came in at a very impressive 127%.
127%. So that means their existing customers are not only sticking around.
But they're actually spending more with Sportradar.
Yeah, that's a huge vote of confidence.
It is. It really suggests they're delivering a lot of value to their clients.
All right, so looking ahead, what kind of guidance did they give for 2025?
Yeah, so they're expecting continued strong growth.
Okay.
They're projecting at least $1.273 billion in revenue for the year.
So that's another 15% growth.
At least, yeah. And they expect adjusted EBITDA to reach at least $281 million.
So another big jump in profitability.
Yeah, a 26% increase. And they also expect to see margins expand by at least another 200 basis points.
So that's really impressive. They're expecting growth across all the key metrics.
Exactly. But there's one important caveat to that guidance.
Okay, I'm listening.
Those projections don't yet include any potential impact from their acquisition of IMG Arena,
Ah, yes, the big news.
which we'll get into in just a moment. But first, I wanted to mention one other really positive financial indicator,
Yeah, okay.
their free cash flow.
So free cash flow, that's basically the cash they have left over after covering all their essential operating expenses.
Right. It's the cash they have available to reinvest in the business, pay down debt, or return to shareholders.
Right. And it's often seen as a better indicator of financial health than just net income.
Yeah, absolutely. So for the full year 2024, Sportradar's free cash flow jumped up to $118 million.
So that's a huge increase and represents a 53% conversion rate from their adjusted EBITDA.
Yeah, which is a really solid figure.
Okay, so now let's talk about that IMG Arena acquisition.
All right, so this is a really strategic move by Sportradar.
So give us the rundown. What is IMG Arena and why did Sportradar want to buy them?
So IMG Arena is a big player in the sports rights and data business. And they have a particularly strong portfolio of rights in tennis, soccer, and basketball.
So some of the most popular sports for betting globally.
Exactly. So for Sportradar, this acquisition is all about strengthening their global content portfolio.
So they can offer even more data and content to their clients.
Right. And it's not just about the quantity of data.
It's about the quality too.
Absolutely. IMG Arena brings rights from over 70 different rights holders,
Wow.
covering a huge number of events throughout the year.
So they're getting access to a lot of high value content.
They are.
And what's really interesting about this deal is the structure.
Yes, this is a very unique acquisition.
In what way?
Well, Sportradar isn't actually paying any upfront cash for IMG Arena.
How does that work?
So Endeavor, which is the parent company of IMG Arena, they're actually going to be providing $225 million in funding.
Wow.
So $125 million of that will go directly to Sportradar as cash.
To support the integration and growth of the business?
Exactly. And the remaining up to $100 million will be used to cover future obligations to certain rights holders.
Okay, so Sportradar is essentially getting this valuable asset without having to shell out a huge sum up front.
Yeah, it's a really clever deal structure.
So it minimizes their immediate financial risk.
While still giving them access to all these valuable assets.
Very strategic.
It is.
So when is this deal expected to close?
The current timeline is for it to close in Q4 of 2025.
So a little ways out.
Yeah, there are still some regulatory hurdles to clear.
But Sportradar is pretty confident it will get done.
Yeah, they seem very optimistic.
And they're expecting this acquisition to be immediately accretive to both their revenue and margins.
Exactly. So they're seeing a very clear path to integrating IMG Arena's offerings and quickly leveraging them to drive growth.
Okay, so moving on to another major partnership, Sportradar also announced an expanded deal with Major League Baseball.
Yeah, this is a big one.
Absolutely. So tell us what's new with this MLB partnership.
Well, they've extended their existing agreement through 2032.
So they're really locking in that long-term relationship.
Yeah, and under this expanded deal, Sportradar becomes the exclusive global provider of official MLB data.
Wow.
That covers everything from betting to media and audiovisual content.
So they have the exclusive rights to distribute MLB data to a wide range of clients worldwide.
That's right.
This is huge.
It is, and it gets even more interesting.
Oh, how so?
MLB has also taken an equity stake in Sportradar.
So now they're not just partners, they're investors too.
Exactly, which really aligns their interests and suggests a much deeper, more strategic partnership going forward.
Yeah, they're really betting on each other's success.
They are.
And this makes a lot of sense given the global growth of baseball.
Especially with the continued legalization of sports betting in new markets.
Exactly. Sportradar is perfectly positioned to capitalize on that trend.
No doubt.
And it seems like these long-term content deals are a key part of their strategy.
Oh, absolutely.
So why is that?
Yeah.
Why is it so important for them to lock in these agreements for years to come?
Well, there are a few reasons.
Okay.
First, it gives them much better cost visibility.
Meaning they know what their content costs are going to be for the foreseeable future.
Right, which makes planning and budgeting much easier.
It also reduces risk.
Absolutely.
They don't have to worry about their costs suddenly spiking or losing access to key content.
And that stability also allows them to invest more confidently in technology and product innovation.
Because they know they have the content pipeline secured.
Exactly.
And it also gives them a much clearer runway to develop new and enhanced offerings based on that secured content.
They can build for the long term.
Yeah, it's a very strategic approach.
It is.
So let's shift gears a bit and talk about some of the technological advancements that Sportradar highlighted.
Okay, sure.
One thing that really stood out to me was their increasing use of automated data collection.
Yes, this is really game-changing stuff.
So explain how this works and why it's so important.
Sure. So traditionally, collecting live sports data relied heavily on manual input.
People sitting there watching the games and recording what was happening.
Right, which was slow, prone to errors, and limited in the amount of data you could capture.
Right.
But now, with advancements in computer vision and AI...
They can automate a lot of that process.
Exactly.
So how much of their data collection is automated now?
They said that about 50% of matches now have live data captured through computer vision.
That's huge.
It is. And the amount of data they can collect this way is just staggering.
How much data are we talking about?
They said they can capture up to 100,000 data points per match using this technology.
100,000? That's incredible.
It is. And to put that in perspective, that's nearly 100 times the amount of data they could collect through traditional methods.
So they're getting a much more granular and detailed view of what's happening in each game.
Exactly.
And that richer data feeds into so many of their other products and services.
It's the foundation for everything.
It allows them to offer much more accurate and real-time insights.
Which gives them a huge competitive edge.
Absolutely. So one of the products that leverages this enhanced data is their Foresight offering.
Yes, Foresight is really cool.
So tell us what it is and how it works.
Basically, Foresight uses this deep data to create more engaging experiences for sports fans.
Okay.
Especially in the context of in-play betting.
So betting on the game while it's happening.
Exactly.
So how does it work?
Well, it provides viewers with all sorts of real-time stats, insights, and visualizations.
So they can make more informed betting decisions.
Right, but it's not just about the data.
It's about the presentation, too.
Absolutely. They've designed it to be really intuitive and engaging.
Really enhance the viewing experience.
Exactly.
And it seems like it's working.
Oh, yeah.
What kind of results are they seeing?
Well, they said that streams that incorporate foresight are seeing a 24% longer average viewing time compared to standard streams.
That's a huge increase.
Yeah, it shows that people are finding it more engaging and informative.
So it's a win-win.
It is.
Viewers get a better experience, and Sportradar and their clients see more engagement and potentially more betting activity.
Right.
And they're planning to roll out foresight for even more sports in the future.
Yeah, it's currently available for tennis, basketball, and table tennis.
Okay.
And they plan to launch it for soccer later in 2025.
So expanding into another major betting sport.
Exactly.
And they also mentioned that they're working on an enhanced version of foresight for next year.
Yeah, they're constantly innovating.
Always pushing the boundaries.
Yeah.
So another interesting development they talked about was the expansion of betting opportunities through these so-called micro markets.
Yeah, this is all about creating more granular betting options.
So instead of just betting on who wins the game.
You can bet on all sorts of smaller events within the game.
Like what? Give us some examples.
So, for example, in an ATP tennis match, they've launched 1,500 new betting opportunities per match.
1,500, that's a lot.
It is. So you can bet on things like who will win the next point, what the score will be after the next 2 games, all sorts of things.
So it really adds a whole new level of excitement and engagement.
It does.
And it's not just tennis. They've done the same thing for NBA games.
Right. They've added 1,200 new betting opportunities per game.
So you can bet on things like who will score the next basket, will the next possession result in a turnover, all sorts of granular events.
Exactly. And they plan to roll out these micro markets to even more sports in 2025.
So things like football, baseball, and ice hockey.
Yeah, they're really changing the game when it comes to betting options.
That's all about making it more dynamic and engaging.
Absolutely.
All right, so another area they highlighted was their managed trading services, or MTS, which is a really interesting part of their business.
Yeah, MTS is essentially an outsourced trading desk for sportsbook operators.
So they're handling the complex back-end operations of managing odds, pricing, and risk for these bookmakers.
Exactly.
So these bookmakers don't have to build out those capabilities themselves.
Right. They can rely on Sportradar's expertise in technology.
So how is that business performing?
It's doing really well.
Okay.
Their MTS turnover reached 35 billion euros in 2024.
That's a massive amount of betting volume.
It is, and they also achieved an improved margin for their clients, meaning they're making MTS even more profitable for the bookmakers who use it.
So it's a win-win.
It is, and their client base is growing rapidly.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they now provide MTS to over 250 bookmakers, encompassing over 500 sportsbook brands.
Wow. So they're becoming the go-to provider for this service.
They are.
And what's really interesting about MTS is the amount of data it gives Sportradar.
Yeah, they're managing bets from millions of unique bettors.
So they get unparalleled insights into betting patterns and preferences.
Exactly, which allows them to constantly refine their MTS offering.
Make it even more effective.
Right, and here's the really cool part.
Yeah.
They can also leverage that data to inform their advertising business.
So they can help their clients acquire new customers more effectively.
Exactly. They know exactly who to target and what kind of offers are most likely to resonate.
It's a really powerful combination.
It is.
All right, so shifting to global expansion, they talked quite a bit about their efforts in Brazil.
Yeah, Brazil is a really exciting market right now.
A huge growth opportunity.
Absolutely.
So what's Sportradar doing in Brazil?
Well, they've opened an office there.
So they have a local presence.
Yeah, and they're already seeing strong traction.
Okay.
With about 80 sports betting licenses granted so far and over 100 expected.
It's a rapidly growing market.
It is, and Sportradar has already signed up 35 new sportsbook clients in Brazil for their MTS offering.
So they're quickly penetrating that market.
They are, and they're not just focused on sports betting.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they're also piloting marketing services specifically for iGaming in Brazil.
So things like online casinos and poker.
Right, and they see a big opportunity to cross-sell between sports betting and iGaming customers.
So acquire a customer for sports betting and then potentially convert them into an iGaming customer as well.
Exactly.
Smart strategy.
It is.
And they've already signed up 2 companies for these iGaming marketing services, so they're starting to gain some traction there.
They are.
Okay, so now let's dive a little deeper into some of the financial details beyond just the top-line numbers.
Okay.
One thing that stood out to me was the continued strong growth in the U.S. market.
Yeah, the U.S. is a key growth driver for Sportradar.
So how do they perform there?
U.S. revenue surged by 58% year over year.
Wow.
And in Q4 alone, it grew by 41%.
So they're really capitalizing on the expansion of sports betting in the U.S.
They are.
And how much of their total revenue is now coming from the U.S.?
It now represents 24% of their total revenue.
So a significant and growing portion of their business.
Yeah.
But it's not just the U.S.
No, their rest of the world segment also saw solid growth.
Oh.
Revenue increased by 19% year over year for that segment.
So they're seeing growth across all their major markets.
They are.
And looking at their different business lines, both their betting technology and solutions segment.
Yeah.
And their sports content, technology, and services segment.
Right.
Both saw strong growth in Q4.
They did, driven by strong demand for their various data, streaming, and engagement products.
So a really well-rounded performance.
Absolutely.
Now let's talk about the expense side of the equation.
Okay.
They did see a significant increase in sports rights expenses in Q4.
Yeah, primarily due to the acquisition of those new ATP tennis rights.
Which makes sense.
Yeah, it's a strategic investment.
But on the other hand, their adjusted personnel expenses as a percentage of revenue actually decreased.
Yeah, so they're getting more efficient with their workforce.
And their adjusted purchase services expense also decreased in Q4.
Right, mainly because of the phasing out of certain hardware setup costs from the previous year.
Okay, so all in all, their cost management seems to be pretty solid.
Yeah, they're doing a good job of controlling costs while still investing in growth.
Now, one thing that might jump out at people looking at their financials is that they reported a net loss in Q4 of 2024.
Yeah, but it's important to understand the context there.
Okay.
That loss was primarily due to a $65 million change in unrealized currency losses.
So a non-cash accounting item.
Right. It's basically a reflection of fluctuations in exchange rates.
And it doesn't really reflect the underlying performance of the business.
Exactly. Their operating performance was very strong.
Okay, that's important to keep in mind.
Yeah, and their balance sheet remains very healthy.
Okay.
With $348 million in cash and no debt.
So they're in a very strong financial position.
They are.
And they also continued buying back their own stock during the quarter.
Yeah, they repurchased about $20 million worth of stock.
So management clearly believes the stock is undervalued.
That's usually a good sign.
Okay, so looking ahead to 2025, they mentioned expecting further margin expansion throughout the year.
Yeah, they're expecting margins to improve as the year progresses.
With the highest margins anticipated in Q3.
Right, mainly due to the phasing of their sports rights costs.
Okay.
Some of those higher costs are front-loaded in the year.
And another key priority for them is to continue increasing their free cash flow conversion rate.
Yeah, they want to keep improving the efficiency with which they turn their earnings into cash.
All right, so that was a very comprehensive overview of Sportradar's Q4 2024 earnings call.
They had a lot going on.
They did, but I think we covered all the key points.
I think so.
So now for our This Is Not Financial Advice segment.
Where we let our imaginations run wild.
And brainstorm some outrageous but plausible trade ideas.
Based on what we've learned.
So what crazy idea are you cooking up today based on Sportradar's performance and strategy?
Okay, so let's really think big picture here.
Okay.
We've seen how Sportradar has established itself as the dominant infrastructure provider for the global sports betting industry.
They have the data, the technology, the reach.
Right, and they're constantly innovating, pushing the boundaries of what's possible.
So what could they go from here?
Well, think about the evolving media landscape.
Okay.
The lines between sports, betting, and entertainment are blurring more and more.
And Sportradar is right at the intersection of all that.
Exactly. So here's the outrageous but plausible idea. What if Sportradar leverages all that data and technology to launch its own direct-to-consumer sports content platform?
Whoa, that's a bold move.
It is, but think about it.
Okay.
They could potentially start by focusing on underserved sports.
Maybe niche sports that don't get a lot of mainstream coverage.
Right, or they could offer a completely new kind of viewing experience.
One that's deeply integrated with data and insights.
Exactly, and they could even integrate betting opportunities directly into the platform in regulated markets.
So a truly immersive and interactive experience.
Yeah, they could potentially partner with smaller sports leagues or federations to secure exclusive streaming rights.
Offer something truly unique to sports fans.
Right, and while this is obviously a higher risk scenario,
it's also a potentially very high reward one.
It is.
Sportradar has the data, the technology, and the relationships to potentially disrupt the traditional sports media landscape.
It's not completely out of the realm of possibility.
So it's something to keep an eye on.
Definitely.
But to be crystal clear, that was just a fun thought experiment.
Pure speculation.
Definitely not financial advice.
You always need to do your own research before making any investment decisions.
Absolutely. So what are your thoughts on Sportradar's future? Do you think they have what it takes to become a major player in the direct-to-consumer sports media market?
Let us know what you think in the comments.
We'd love to hear your take.
And until next time, keep diving deep.
And remember, it's your money and your responsibility.